Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Assalamu alaikum, Yasmeen. Thank you so much for being here with me on this episode of Behind the Veil. Yasmeen is the founder of the Intentional Currency, a platform dedicated to empowering Muslim women with the knowledge and tools to achieve financial independence and security. We love to hear that. She has a background in finance and a personal journey of overcoming financial abuse. And she has transformed her passion for wealth building into a mission to educate and inspire. Yasmeen, how are you?
I'm good, alhamdulillah. Thank you so much for having me. I'm very, very excited for this conversation today.
Me too. And reading your introduction, subhanAllah, it sounds like we are going to learn a lot from your journey to building wealth. And my first question for you is actually about this journey. Like, what is your story and what led you to doing what you're doing today?
So we're going to start off at the very deepest question. So my story actually started very, very young. And subhanAllah, I feel in life it's like that when you look backwards, it all makes so much sense. And so my parents split up when I was very young. And both of my parents had a very unique relationship to money that really formed the way that I looked at finances. And so, on the one hand, I saw my mom who really struggled, as a single mom with three kids, sort of living paycheck to paycheck. It's very, very common, and always feeling like there was never enough, and almost there were undercurrents of resentment, or this isn't fair, and it's the government, like those sorts of kind of, that was the language that I was used to growing up. And on the other hand, my dad was at the time a very successful entrepreneur. And so he had this the opposite belief. So he felt like there was so much money everywhere, and every year there was going to be more and more and more, and so we never had to save because there was just so much money available. And so both of these beliefs about money really shaped my thoughts, because on the one hand we couldn't save because there was never enough, and on the other hand you don't have to save because there's so much. And both of these beliefs around money are unhealthy. On the one hand, because we believed that there wasn't enough, we were not saving. And on the other hand, because we believed that money would never end, we were also not saving.
Mm.
And so I really learned that whether you have money or you don't have money, it's actually your behavior that determines your wealth and how financially free you become. And somebody who has so much money can be just as restricted as somebody who has no money. And so my journey with money, those were sort of my formative beliefs and understanding of, actually, if you have money or you don't have money, you should always be consistently saving. And when I turned 18, was probably the biggest event that changed my life and really forced me into this world of finance and understanding the stock market and real estate and all those different things. Is my dad at a certain point had transferred some property into my name to avoid paying taxes. And the government called me on my 18th birthday. They froze all of my savings accounts. They took all of any money that I had. They froze all my bank accounts, and basically said that I was responsible to pay back this massive debt that my dad had. And so, of course, I called my dad and I said, this is my dad who's the successful entrepreneur. I had seen him drive fancy cars and with, fancy houses and all those kinds of things. And I said, Dad, I have this, they want me to pay this back. Can you transfer me the money? And he said, well, I don't have it. You're going to have to wait until I get the next deal. And subhanAllah, I realized that this was somebody who had financial abundance, but because he didn't have strong financial habits, he was actually in no better of a position than my mom.
Mm.
And so that basically forced me to, of course, start working and, pay back this massive debt, which forced me to then kind of take on more risk than maybe I would have as an 18-year-old. And so I ended up, going into the stock market. I realized there was no way I was going to pay it off working at a call center. And so I had to save, I had to invest, I had to go into real estate. I had to learn how these money markets worked in order to pay back this debt as fast as I could. And so that's basically the story of how I got thrown into the world of finance and investing, and also how I learned that healthy financial habits are important no matter how much money you're making.
Wow, subhanallah. At first, when you started, I thought it was going to be a rich dad, poor dad type of story with your mom potentially having the bad habits and your dad having the good habits. But turns out they were both on two extremes, really. Subhanallah. So, okay, now I'm curious to know, your journey led you to some sort of balance. What are some of the mindset shifts that you needed to take on in order to get to this place?
So I think the first thing is understanding that, I was taught as a kid that if you work hard, you'll make a lot of money. And so people who are doing well financially either have very good jobs, they're very highly educated, they are, have some sort of very high level skill. And the truth is that people who have grown their wealth, so people who are at financial freedom, who have significant amounts invested, all they have is strong financial habits. They have been saving consistently and they invest consistently. And so you'll find I'm the perfect example that I've never made a six-figure salary working at the bank. But because I invested consistently and I saved consistently and aggressively, I was still able to have two properties in my 20s, which most people would assume that's because I had a very high paying job, and it's not. And so the first thing to kind of realize is that becoming wealthy is actually accessible to everybody. And the essential skill that it takes to become wealthy is not something you learn at school. It's not something that requires you to have wealthy parents or for you to have a high paying job. The only skill required is delayed gratification. If you can look at your paycheck and consistently save 10% and invest 10%, you will be wealthy, inshallah. That's it.
Wow.
And so that was the first thing that I realized. And I, of course, as you can imagine, I didn't learn that from my parents.
Mm.
So it was actually my first boss who taught that to me. So when I got that job at the call center, this incredible woman, she would have a meeting with every single employee at the bank. And now keeping in mind, she had maybe 400 employees. There were tons and tons of us. She was one of the high level VPs. And she would have a meeting with us to discuss our financial plan. And when I met with her, I said, I actually can't have a financial plan. I'm in debt and I'm going to be in debt for the next 10 years. So there's no point in me saving. We shouldn't even have this meeting. And she looked at me and she said, if you continue saying that, you will be, but you don't have to. And she told me, she said, trust me, you're going to invest 10% of your paycheck starting today, and you're going to do that as long as you work for me. And I did. And she was right. And so I think the first thing is realizing that wealth is accessible to everybody. And the second thing is getting yourself in close proximity with somebody who understands money and understands wealth and who can help you believe in what perhaps you haven't yet seen with your own eyes yet.
Yeah, 100%. Because if in your environment everyone is struggling and no one truly believes that it's possible to become wealthy, then you are also going to be one of those who don't believe it's possible. But it took that one person to change your life, subhanAllah.
It did. And I pray for her all the time because that's my story, but I can only imagine how many other people have the exact same story that can connect back to her.
Yeah. And so would you say, first of all, the delayed gratification thing, easy to say, not easy to do because we live in a capitalist society, and you talk about that on your page on Instagram as well, how hard it is to refrain oneself from buying stuff. Can you tell us a little bit, as potentially someone who used to be a compulsive buyer, how did you manage to stop yourself from spending too much, and what were the results of doing that?
I think you have to understand your own psychology. And so saving is not fun. The gratification is very delayed, especially in the context of today, where you can buy something on Amazon and it shows up the same day. And so saving really has no positive reward in the moment. And so what you want to do is you want to actually automate your saving. You don't want to feel it every month. You don't want to really have to go in and transfer money to your savings account every month. You want that whole entire process to be seamless so that it's happening automatically. When you go in and you're the one who has to put your money into your savings account, put your money into your investment, chances are there's going to be 1 month where you're going to say, you know what? I actually need that money to change my tires, or I actually need that money to do this. And so having it automated is kind of a trick to encourage yourself to stay consistent.
So making the process as seamless as possible so you don't feel the pain of letting go of that money per se.
Exactly. And to be honest, the thing that's important to remember is that the first year is difficult because the first year, when you have a savings account that has $500, $1,000, 1,500, it's very difficult to get excited about those numbers. But after you're consistent for a year, 2 years, 3 years, all of a sudden you start to feel really confident and you start to really feel like you've made progress.
Mm.
And so now, for example, this is 12 years later, it's very easy for me to save because I feel like a saver. I identify as an investor. And so my behavior naturally reflects that. But the first couple years, I very much felt like a fraud in the sense that I was investing, $75 every 2 weeks. I had an investment portfolio that was worth maybe $5,000. And so at that time, it was very difficult to stay motivated. But
Mm.
as time goes on, it gets so much easier.
I love that. I identify as a saver, as a saver. I love that. Instead of a spender. Because as you said, it's not just Amazon nowadays, it's TikTok shop. I don't have TikTok anymore, but a lot of my friends, as soon as I see them wearing something and I ask, oh, where's this from? TikTok shop. And it's just like people are scrolling and buying on a daily basis, subhanAllah. I want to ask what would make this easier? Because for me personally, if I have something to look forward to, meaning like a goal that's related to my finances to reach, like buying a house or buying a property or buying a new car or whatever, or maybe even giving charity a certain amount per year, then that helps me make those sacrifices on a daily basis. Would you say that's the first step, sitting down with oneself and thinking, what are my financial goals?
I do think it's very important to set financial goals. Um, I do think that for most financial goals, for somebody who's just starting out, I'm not sure that it's the biggest motivator in the sense that if your goal is to save $50,000 for a down payment for a house, and you're starting off by saving $300 a month, it can actually be the first couple of months is going to be difficult regardless. And you sort of have to bite the bullet and say, I am going to start doing the habits that are required of the person who I want to become.
Mm.
And it's very much a mindset game. And so having those goals, absolutely, is the first thing that we do in all of my programs. However, it's not what's going to solve the problem. I think, and this is something that we discuss very often in our kind of group coaching sessions, is that ultimately, in order to start spending less, you have to understand the deep psychology that goes into marketing towards your pain points and understand why you are currently seeking validation from your money and from spending money and heal that in order to move past the need of spending money, to realize that there is so much more value in the peace of mind that you will have from being a saver and from being an investor than the temporary pleasure that you get from ordering something on TikTok.
Yeah. And it's not just that, it's everything. So it takes inner work to become good with money as well. Because for you, it began with your parents' stories about money, and for us, it'll be the same. So if you have a parent that's very stingy, you either become a hoarder or also very stingy yourself, and you have to kind of rewrite your story with money and create a healthier narrative that doesn't make you feel unsafe and insecure when you're spending, or the opposite that makes you want to spend all the time in order to get that comfort from somewhere. So yeah, wow. So inner work is necessary no matter what we do, including becoming wealthier, alhamdulillah. Are there like particular mistakes that you see Muslim women make? So if we talk about your clients, like specifically Muslim women, when it comes to money, is there anything specific about that group?
That's an incredible question. So I think that when it comes to Muslim women, and this is something that I say as a Muslim woman who is, there are immigrants in my family. I think it's so important to recognize the dark side of marketing that appeals to the insecurities of visible minorities in a Western context. And what I mean by that is pay attention to luxury brands, to fancy cars, pay attention to the messaging and the marketing. The reason why is because so many of us are searching for this sort of feeling of fitting in or proving to others that we've made it despite all of our, you know, challenges. And so I think what I see in Muslim women as one of our biggest challenges is falling into that trap of buying these purses or designer clothes or fancy cars when it's so important for us to recognize that these brands are, first of all, taking advantage of our Muslim brothers and sisters. They do not care. They have not spoken up for any of the ethical issues that we're facing right now. And they are 100% marketing to your pain points of not feeling like you fit in a Western society and feeling like having a purse when you go out is going to make you look like the pinnacle of success, despite the fact that maybe you wear hijab or you look a little bit different. And so it's a little bit harsh, but I think it's so important for us to have this wake up call that when you spend money, spend it on the companies that deserve your money. The companies that one day, when we're all standing in front of Allah, we can answer and say, this is why I made that purchase. And subhanAllah, we've had so many discussions about this in our coaching sessions, is this situation with Palestine has really woken all of us up. And we have no excuse to say, I'm not sure what this company's stance is. We know what every single company's stance is. And so, as Muslim women, I think the biggest mistake or the biggest maybe thing that we need to overcome is really being intentional with the way that we're spending our money and realizing that this is, subhanAllah, just as a lack of wealth can be a test, the fact that we have such an abundance of spending money today is also a test. And when you realize that and you think about it in that way, it actually becomes so much easier to naturally spend less because you're not tempted to go and buy from a company who is laughing at you, laughing at us, and sort of, pointing to just, you're not good enough. And this is how good you would look if you drove this car. This is how good you would look if you had this purse, right? When you can see it for what it is, it makes it so much easier to make better financial decisions.
Mm. 100%. So understanding the difference between looking rich and actually being wealthy, knowing that the latter is more important, both for this life and for the next one, because when you are wealthy, you're able to do good with your money. When you look rich, you're just seeking external validation to fit in, as you mentioned. 100%. Now, when it comes to Muslim women, there's something that I read on one of your posts that I wanted to touch on. You wrote, "Your husband's wealth is not your wealth." And I wanted to ask you, what did you mean by that? Because growing up as a Muslim woman, we're taught his money is your money and your money is your money. So, what is your stance on that?
Not a popular one. I think it's really important to understand where this concept of your husband's money is your money comes from, because it's actually not Islam. So in Islam, although divorce is not something that is encouraged, it is something that is allowed. Another thing that's allowed in Islam is for a man to have multiple wives. And so his money by default is absolutely not his wife's, right? And where it actually comes from is religions like Catholicism, where you can never get divorced. And so from the day that you get married, your husband's wealth is your wealth. You take his last name, you take on his identity, and it's impossible to even get a divorce in the church. And so your husband's wealth is your wealth. In Islam, this is not the case.
Mm,
In Islam, when you get married, your husband is responsible for taking care of your main expenses. And so during that time, this is sort of an ease that we have when we get married. And so you should be using still this time to grow your wealth. And this is the beautiful thing about receiving meher, which is, a financial gift that allows you to use this gift to grow your wealth even as you're married. And similar to receiving inheritance, these are all ways that you can continue to grow your wealth even if you're not working.
mm,
And it's not fun to maybe acknowledge when we've been taught this sort of belief again and again that your husband's wealth is your wealth, your husband's wealth. But it's very important to recognize that as early as possible, because what I've seen is many women get divorced. They only had an Islamic marriage. And so they do not get 50-50. In fact, they get nothing when they get divorced, aside from if they have kids, they get child support or they get, money for the kids. And they're shocked when they realize, I helped my husband build his business and I'm the one, I did this and I took care of the kids this whole time. And because they didn't realize that Islamically, his wealth is not your wealth, unfortunately, they end up in very difficult situations. And so the idea is not to feel resentful about that or to get upset. The idea is that when you get married, you should be having open conversations with your husband about what your financial plan is going to look like. So if you do get married and you're not working, no problem. But who's taking care of your retirement then? Who's contributing to your retirement plan? Where is your emergency fund in case your spouse passes away? Where are you going to be allowed to work part-time and invest? And all of those sorts of discussions have to happen because your husband's wealth is not your wealth.
mm. I 100% agree with that. And being a woman who got divorced and had nothing to her name, subhanAllah, I can definitely attest that it's not a good position to be in. And I'm not one who advocates for full-time work for women, especially if they're raising children. But I do think we need to have a plan, and that discussion with a spouse is vital, as you said. If I'm not going to work, then what are we doing to make sure that I'm going to be okay if anything happens to you? That's just a basic conversation that will put a lot of women at ease and their children as well, because that's what matters. And a lot of us don't actually have family that we can go back to. We don't have a father that we can rely on if anything happens to our spouses or brothers. So it's really important to have some sort of plan B in case of emergency or catastrophe. May Allah protect us all.
I mean,
Thank you for explaining that. I think Not a lot of people would disagree with that. That's a very rational way of seeing things, alhamdulillah. Now, let's talk about concrete steps. For the woman who comes to you and who has never budgeted before and saved money and invested, what is the actual process to get her to a place where she's wealthy?
That's a great question. So the first step is you have to bite the bullet and start tracking your spending. And so I always encourage anybody who works with me, they have to go back 30 days and track all of their spending and divide all of their spending into categories and really identify whether that spending is in alignment or not. And a lot of the times, especially because we spend so mindlessly, when you go back and track, you realize that perhaps you're not spending as you should be. And you realize there are subscriptions that are going out that maybe you don't have to, and there's extra coffee shop expenses that maybe didn't need to happen. And the act of going back and tracking it is naturally going to cause you to change. And so that's the first step. The second step for somebody who really has the goal of financial freedom and building wealth is you have to be saving minimum 10% of your income, and you have to be investing minimum 10% of your income. And so both of these are actually different. So saving is going to be for your short term. And so your savings account is what you're going to use, if you need to change your car battery or there's a small repair to do in your home, you're going to go into your savings. Your investments is money that you're never going to touch. And so that's money that you're not going to use for the next 30, 40 years. And so that 10% is what is actually growing your wealth. Your savings are what are protecting your investments. Because if you have savings, you don't have to dig into your investments.
Mm.
So number one would be start tracking your spending. Number two, automate 10% of your income to go to your savings. And number three, 10% to your investments. Is it difficult? Yes. And what you'll realize is that perhaps you're accustomed, if you work in sort of an office environment, everybody has around the same income. All of a sudden, you have to make adjustments because you're making 20% less than everybody else now. And so your car is not going to be as nice as everybody else. Perhaps everybody else is buying a home and you're still renting a smaller place. Everybody else is going out for dinner every Friday and you're not. And so you really have to learn how to humble yourself and believe in those long-term goals. And that is the price of growing wealth.
Mm. And it's definitely worth it. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Can you tell us a little bit about why it is worth it? Like, if you look at your current lifestyle, would you have it any different? And if not, why? What makes it so special for you to have those habits and that mindset?
I think that it is the biggest gift that you can give to yourself. And I say that because I started investing at 18. I had a lot of debt. Um, and I still started investing and I invested consistently. And I was able to buy my first rental property at 24. 26, I bought our family home. And at 27, I became a single mom and the sole financial provider for 3 kids under 3. And in any other context, if I did not have that financial literacy, and at 18, I was given that amount of debt, and at 27, after working at a call center for years and years, I became a single mom with 3 young kids, my life would have looked drastically different. Because by the time I was 27, I already had many streams of income from my dividends from my investments, my rental property, my job, now my business. My life didn't actually change very much. And I was able to afford all of the support that I needed as a single mom. So I was able to afford having, our meals come prepared every week. We have a cleaning lady. My kids go to a phenomenal preschool. My kids never have to feel any sort of financial stress. We live in the same home. We don't have to move. All of those huge blessings can really be connected to the fact that before I was in a difficult position, I was already preparing and protecting myself by investing.
Wow. And the stress of going through a divorce is already so big and so draining. So add on to that the stress of not having the finances to get yourself out of that divorce by hiring the right lawyers or just taking care of your children, or taking care of your mental health and getting the support that you need, as you said. Haven't been through it, again, it's not a situation that anyone wants to be in. So really congratulations to you, Yasmeen. That's beautiful. Allah Mubarak. You said something though that I haven't heard a lot of financial advisors say, which is that you have started investing even if you had debt. Usually, people will say, clear your debt first and then build that emergency fund and then start investing. How come you didn't approach things that way?
That's actually my boss who gave me that advice. And I think she was very smart to do that. Because what happens when you carry debt, and when you carry debt for a long time, is you start to identify with that. I'm somebody who cannot be trusted with money. I'm somebody who struggles with debt. I can't get out of credit card debt. I can't control my spending. I'm never going to have savings. I'm never going to be able to afford a house. And when you start to have those beliefs, the longer that you continue to have that debt, the deeper that identity seeps into you. And so my boss, the advice that she gave me is, you have this debt, but you are an investor. You are a saver. You are going to be wealthy. You are going to be very successful. And so you're going to start investing today. Even though you have some debt, you're actually an investor. And thank goodness that she said that to me, because I changed my identity. In fact, I never identified with the debt. I always identified as an investor who had the unfortunate circumstance of having debt. And all of my decision making after that reflected my identity as an investor and not my identity as being someone who struggles with debt. And so when I started, I was 19 years old and already receiving hundreds of dollars in dividends. That was normal for me because I was an investor. And that encouraged me to invest more and to save more. And when the opportunity came to buy real estate, I wasn't scared because I was an investor. And so, yes, if you want to talk about the numbers, the financial numbers and the interest rates and investment rates and so on, does it make sense to invest when you have debt? No. But if you want to talk about the psychology and you already know that you were born to be wealthy and you are going to be the first person in your family who is going to make that difference, who's not going to struggle with debt, who's going to grow wealth, who's going to have investments, then start acting like that person today, and it will naturally come.
I love that. I think that that makes a huge difference in how someone shows up in their daily life as well. And final question for you, Yasmeen, when it comes to the Sharia compliant type of investments, because it's probably what the woman who's listening to us right now is wondering, like, how can I invest when all my life I've heard that investing is haram? Is there any tools that you can recommend?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the first thing to understand is interest is haram, so any sort of debt. But when you look at investing, you want to make sure that you're investing in companies that have either very, very little interest or no interest involved, and that they're all in sort of head-on industries. And so you can actually find this out using screeners that are available. I'm trying to think, there are so many of them now, alhamdulillah. There's Musaffa. If you're in India, there's Islamic Stock. Anywhere in the West, there's Zoya. I want to say there's one called Islamically. On my page, I have, I think, a reel that has all of them listed out. But these apps will basically do all of the work for you. And so you can go in and filter through companies that have no interest, are in halal industries. You can even filter by country, you can filter by size. And so it makes it very easy now to invest.
Wahed is the one that I use, and they basically do everything for me. I just put in the money every month, and then they invest it in the stocks that they deem to be halal.
Yeah, exactly. So Wahid is a really good option, especially for people who are not sure about how to invest or don't really know very much about how it works. Wahid is a really, really good option. Exactly as you said, they manage everything for you. Your savings still grow, your investments are still there, and you know that someone else is managing and making sure that it's halal.
Mm. Alhamdulillah. And lastly, Yasmin, how can women out there work with you in order to grow their wealth?
So I have two main programs. The first one is the Wealth Circle. And so that is for women who are at the very beginning of their finance journey. We cover exactly as you mentioned, like how to budget, how much you should be saving, how to invest, all of those money mindset beliefs. And so it's a monthly membership. People can join, leave anytime. There's no minimum requirement. And the second option is our halal investing program. That one is really 6 months long, and the next round actually starts in January. But that is where we work together to really open investment accounts, learn how to build a portfolio, learn how to identify which stocks are halal, which ones aren't, how to find them, how to buy them, and then we really track portfolios for the rest of the year. So it's a very intensive program where you learn how to invest yourself.
Okay, and I'm guessing at the end of that program, you are fully independent to do your own investments after that and carry on. Mhm.
Exactly. Yeah. And women have actually gone on to manage even their husbands' investments. And so alhamdulillah, it's a lot of fun.
That sounds exciting. Well, may Allah reward you for the work that you do. I think it's really important that we teach women about financial literacy nowadays, alhamdulillah. And may you be able to continue this mission. And I can't wait to see how it continues for you and your clients, inshallah. Thank you so much for coming here and telling us so much about how to become wealthy, Yasmin.
No, it's my absolute pleasure. And likewise, thank you so much for the incredible work that you do. May Allah reward you and continue to put barakah in everything that you're working on.
Ameen, Ya Rab, Ameen. I'll put your details in the description box below, inshallah, for anyone who wants to follow your Instagram, in which you share also a lot of tips about how to save and how to budget and how to invest. Alhamdulillah.
Sounds good, inshallah.
Thank you so much, everyone. See you in the next episode.